All right, Sons of UCF, we are back. This is a little Sons Today version, post-game recap-ish, even though the game's been over for a couple of hours now, a couple of days now. Adam Eaton and Brian Peterson here with you. And Brian, it finally happened. Scott Frost suffers his first loss as a UCF coach in, 16 games. Knights go to Manhattan, Kansas, and come out with a 34-20 loss. Brian, what do you think? I mean, let's break this down. We can do stats. We can do everything else, right? But all things considered, 34-20, how upset, how disappointed, how frustrated are you with taking the loss on Saturday?
Well, I don't think that we can say that we should be upset at the loss, right? You and I discussed last week, I think you had posed the question, if you asked any UCF fan preseason, at the start of the season, if they would be happy with a 3-1 record going into, what are we going into week 5 now? Would we be okay with that? And I think that the answer for most UCF fans would probably be, yeah, in this rebuilding year with Scott Frost bringing in all these new coaches and these new players, kind of a year zero, like we've said a couple times now. I think 3-1 is a fair record for where this team is. Now, was it a heartbreaking loss? Yes. You know, coming into the game, did a lot of UCF fans maybe get ahead of themselves, thinking that perhaps we were going to, win this game before it was played out on the field? Perhaps. But I don't think that UCF fans should be discouraged by the performance that we saw on the field on Saturday. I mean, K-State, despite their record, is a really good team. They were a preseason favorite to perhaps win the conference or at least appear in the conference championship game. Don't let their record fool you. They are better than what their record indicated coming into this game was 1-3. And other than some perhaps questionable calls or no calls by the refs on Saturday, don't get me started. I think that things played out pretty much okay for UCF. We would have liked to see perhaps some better performance on offense, but the defense, played a heck of a game on Saturday. And despite what the final record shows, I think the game was a little bit closer than it appeared on paper.
Yeah, I mean, did I want to win this one? Absolutely, right. In hindsight, you look back on it and you can see the factors that were stacked in favor of Kansas State, coming off a bye week, getting their best player back in Dylan Edwards. Obviously, UCF coming off an emotional week with the loss of Coach Sean Clark, going on the road for the first road game. I mean, you could see how some things maybe made this game tougher. And you and I were talking all week, like, why is Kansas State favored by so many points? Well, I guess Vegas maybe knows something we don't know, right?
They always do.
With the home crowd and the bye week and Dylan Edwards, right? I guess that factored in enough where Vegas said, hey, Kansas State's the better team on paper, and they were the better team on the field, Brian. And look, the reality was you can't win games, unfortunately. I mean, our offense just started off too pedestrian. 8 plays, 20 yards was our first quarter offensive output, Brian. That's not going to get it done. 14 plays, 111 yards was our second quarter output, right? A little bit better, but you put yourself behind, unfortunately, too early on with all the miscues on offense and just the inability to move the ball. You put the defense on the field for a long period of time. And look, there are people on Twitter blaming the defense for this kind of stuff. Like, I get it. Like, you give it 34 points, and that doesn't sound good, but this is one of those where the stats don't tell the whole story of the game. I think the defense kept UCF in it for a long time, and after a while, they made stop after stop after stop. And I think the offense wasn't getting any points on the field. I think at some point defense gets frustrated. They're on the field a lot, right? They're getting short fields back because of miscues on the offensive side too. So yes, 34 points is a lot of points to give up, but I don't think that's the way that the game really unfolded from a defensive standpoint. Obviously, could they play better? Yes. Do they need to play better? Absolutely. But I think this game just too far behind early on, right? You get too far behind. The offense is sputtering. Kansas State gets on a hot streak, right? They're making plays for the first time. They're excited. Their fans are excited. You could tell on the sidelines, Kansas State really wanted this. Like I was saying to my wife when watching the game, like Kansas State would get like a pedestrian first down, and like the whole sideline was going nuts and jumping up and down and slapping each other the helmets. And I was like, all right, like this means something to them. They've been like, this is what they've been waiting for, right? And UCF unfortunately never overcomes that, Brian. But you just can't play offense like that. I mean, that unfortunately, I don't know what offense that was. Maybe you said it earlier, like it's a rebuilding year. Maybe we forgot that and we thought we were different than we were. But that offense clearly looked like not only was it rebuilding, but it was missing a few parts as it took the field on Saturday.
Yeah, Scott Frost mentioned in his presser that he thought that perhaps the defense was, getting tired towards the end of the game. And I think if you look at the stats, to your point, Adam, you would see that the time of possession was very lopsided in K-State's favor. The Knights offense just could not put together enough drives to either score points or to at least give the defense some time to rest on the sidelines before having to come back out there. Which I think leads to part of the fact that you see so many points scored by K-State. Scott Frost also mentioned that he thought that a lot of the players were perhaps emotional coming into this game from, the passing of Coach Sean Clark, who obviously passed away tragically the week, leading up to this game. So I don't know if that was a factor leading into this game. To your point, I think K-State really needed this win. So I think that perhaps their team is a little more energized and willing to go out there and put themselves on the line to get this win. Perhaps they were coming from a better spot mentally coming into this game. I can't imagine what these players are going through, having to deal with the loss of offensive line coach Clark. But you have to imagine that has to play a factor in this game.
19 minutes and 42 seconds was 52 seconds rather, the time of possession for Kansas State in the first half, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, your defense it just has to hold up, Brian, and obviously defensively, again, I think they held up. Obviously, they gave up plays, and ultimately, I think you can't come back from that. At some point, some of those late touchdowns, I think, become what they become. But have you ever seen a situation, Brian, where a starting quarterback leaves the field, appeared to be in tears, jersey taken off, arm barely moving, appeared to be like, glued to his side, and you said to yourself, man, this looks like a season ender. Like, we were all like, oh my goodness, what happens? And then I don't know, magically, I don't know what's back there in the old locker rooms, Brian. I'm not sure what the medical diagnoses are, but Taven Jackson comes trotting back on the field and takes back over for the Knights after Ja'Carri Brown was wildly uneven, if not terrible at points in time. Brian, I've never seen that happen before, where I thought a QB was so much so that they put a new jersey on him without his name on the back, because I think they threw that one out. Maybe they cut him off him. I have no idea, Brian, but the Taven Jackson saga will be one to monitor here over the next couple of weeks, but I've never seen anything like that in my life.
Yeah, what a crazy story. Anything you can take away from this game, win or loss on the Knights side, and, say what you want about K-State and their record. But the only thing that you can say is that Taven Jackson is such a trooper, man. What a performance for him to take the injury that he did. Now, we don't know what they have discovered in the last 24, 48 hours. But all indications are that he suffered an AC sprain on his non-throwing shoulder, I believe it was, when he took a hit, early in the second quarter, just before halftime. And I mean, he did come up, get off the field on his own power. However, he went directly into the medical tent. And once he came out of the medical tent, they took him into the locker room. He had tears in his eyes, as you indicated. And I thought that, the season was over for the Knights at that point. Obviously, Cam is hurt or was hurt, or, we don't really know the status of his medical condition.
No idea what's going on with Cam.
And Ja'Carri Brown came into to the quarterback position and led the team from there. But, we're 4 games, well, I guess 3.5 games into the season at that point, and you got to wonder, like, what's going to happen at quarterback. We still have, quite a bit of season ahead of us. And it's never good to see your quarterback coming off the field with tears in his eyes. And then somehow, miraculously, in the second half, here comes Taven Jackson. Now, Adam, I got to throw an apology out to one Trace Trelko, our friend and colleague.
Oh, that guy.
He posted that Taven was back in his pads and warming up on the sideline. I had tweeted out at some point during the game that Scott Adams from the radio broadcast had posted, or at least had announced, that he was warming up on the sideline. Trace got the scoop first, and I didn't give credit to Trace. So I apologize, Trace. You had the scoop first. You were there. You posted it first. But, I mean, just what a gritty performance by Taven Jackson to come back into that game. He told McKenzie, like, hey, I'm ready to go. I want to get back out there. And even in the post game, he was emotional when asked the question, like, hey, Taven, tell us your thoughts about coming back into the game after you got the injury. And he almost looked like he teared up in emotion to answer that question. And his response was, look, I just wanted to get back out there and be with the team.
Yeah, like it's wild. One, you typically would see that maybe after halftime, right? Like, okay, you go and get checked out. Oh, hey, I'm good. I'll come out at halftime. That didn't happen. It wasn't until like sometime, early parts of the third quarter. And here's what Scott Frost said. Scott Frost said he came out of the halftime knowing that Taven had what he thought at that point was a broken collarbone, knowing that Jakari had an AC joint sprain in his shoulder, his also his non-throwing shoulder. He came out at halftime thinking he was going to have to play Cam Fancher, right? Yeah. So with all this, here's what I think we learned, Brian. I think we learned Taven Jackson's QB1, right? Like, I think we've learned that. If not for his, for what he proved on the field on Saturday, the fact that Frost wants to go back to the well with him, even though he was obviously going to be compromised in some capacity with an injury, and you have, I don't know what level of health in Cam Fancher, and you have Jakari Brown with the same injury. Like, it's clear that I think that Taven Jackson's QB1, right? I think that's clear. Two, I think it's clear. Look, I like Scott Frost, and I'm glad he's back, and I want it to work out for him. I think it's clear he lied to us, Brian, because he kept telling us he had 3 quarterbacks he thought he could win with. I don't know. I don't know. Like Cam Fancher, again, I don't know what his injury is, so I don't want to speculate, but Cam Fancher somehow went from QB1 to QB3. Again, I don't know how that happened. Jakari, look, I like that kid, man. I spent some time with him at media day, like literally one of the nicest, most impressive human beings I've ever met in my life. But it's clear Scott Frost does not want him doing anything with his right hand that involves him throwing a football with it, right? So I don't know what's going on here. All I can tell you is it appears that Taven Jackson's QB1, right? And if for no other reason than he earned that on the field, maybe earned it with his teammates with some toughness, but the offense was relatively dreadful, even more dreadful than earlier with Jakari Brown in there. Now, granted, I say this, and Jakari also has an 82-yard touchdown pass, which, if we're being fair, wasn't even a great ball, by the way, but it happens to go to DJ Black touchdown. We take it. So the QB situation, we knew was going to be a thing all year, Brian, but here it's back. And, hats off to Taven for gutting it out and trying to get UCF back into things. When he was in there, obviously things kind of picked back up in the third quarter, but we got a lot of work to do, Brian. Like, one, and again, I respect that he was injured and he's trying to cut it out. His situational awareness has to get a little bit better. The slide on third down, I know you're trying to do the safe thing and not get hit, and I'm sure they're teaching quarterbacks to slide, don't take headshots. If you remember, he took a vicious shot against Jack State, right, where it was a flag, obviously, but he tries to slide a yard short. We go for 3rd and 4th. Jakari fumbles, and there goes that. The drive where we get down, where we have the ability, I like the way we kept saying this. We were a possession away from being a possession away, I think is the way you do the math on that. And we get down there, and we have issues with getting the playoff on time. We have clock management issues. We have delays of game. Like, the entire thing just implodes. So much so that I don't think we're talking enough about this, Brian. You're an accountant. And Michael Hoffman yelled at us recently because he didn't like our counting skills on this particular show. So
I came prepared.
Okay, good. So help me with something here. UCF is down by 2 touchdowns, right? They're down 31-17, and they go down, and they've got that series I'm describing where they couldn't get the play clock, off on time. The plays couldn't come in, whatever, right? So we're down 2 touchdowns. Scott Frost, that's 14 points, right? Is my math right there? Okay, 14 points.
Your math
Scott
is correct.
Frost elects to kick a field goal to go down 20, which puts us down 11, which also puts us down potentially 2 touchdowns. Now, again, I know you're going to say, well, you could go for 2, you could score a touchdown, go for 2, kick a field goal, tie the game, but we turned a 2-possession game into 2%. Like, I don't know that we did anything on that, but I also don't blame Scott Frost when he's looking at this offense being like, these idiots can't even snap the ball on time. Somebody get a kicker in here. I don't know what's going on, Brian, but that whole sequence and Taven Jackson, just, again, I'm glad he was back. I think he's clearly QB1 now by the way Scott's, talking and thinking about him, but his situational awareness in moments like that, I know he's an upperclassman, but he hasn't played a ton of time on the field. So perhaps this is just the growing pains of that, but that's got to get better because that was an ugly sequence. If we score a touchdown there, 31-24 at that point, maybe it's a different ball game. Maybe things break differently, but obviously, it wasn't meant to be for the Knights.
Yeah, you can talk about coulda, woulda, shoulda all day long, right? If the ball bounces a certain way, perhaps the game turns out differently than it did on Saturday. But you have to wonder if, obviously, you've got the situation with Sean Clark on the players' minds, so that's affecting him. B, the offensive line was just getting decimated all day long. Whoever was quarterback, whether it was Taven Jackson or Ja'Cory Brown, whoever was back there taking the snaps had absolutely zero time to throw. They were getting harassed all day long. And then C, you've got to factor in the fact that Taven took that injury, had to go to the locker room. So where was his thought process in the second half, coming out, making that play, you want him to take the slide, get the first down. He slides a little bit early, is the fact that he took that, that massive hit prior to that play taking place, is that affecting him in some way, right? He's looking to get down before he takes another hit. I don't know. I'm not a football player. I can't imagine what it's like to go put your body on the line like these players do, nor am I a football coach. So, going back to your point about Scott Frost kicking the points or kicking the field goal, taking the points at that point, perhaps that's a morale thing, right? You're looking as a coach, you want to get some points on the board, try and, change that deficit. Yes, I guess theoretically looking back 2020, Monday morning quarterback, this thing and say that, hey, you're still 2 scores behind at that point. But football is a game about momentum, right? And perhaps Scott Frost and this coaching offense was looking for some way to spark this team, show them that we can score some points and get their, their mind right. Tough to say. And obviously it's easy for us to sit here and criticize and, say, oh, I would have done things differently if I was, playing quarterback or if I was, head coach. But at the time, a little bit of a head scratcher. Why'd you kick the field goal? Why didn't you go for it? Things weren't looking up at that point. I had actually asked a question at some point in the second half, like, should we even be playing Taven at this point? It does feel like we're so far behind. Are we going to be able to come back? Do we rest him and hope that he, whatever this injury isn't a major injury and he's able to come back, 100% healthy for the game against Kansas on Saturday? So many factors to consider. And when you're on the sidelines, you got to make those decisions. It's tough to do.
I'm going to do a prediction right now, Brian. Prediction. Monday, Scott Frost is going to meet the media, and the headline afterwards will be, Frost non-committal on quarterback. I don't think he's going to tell us what's going on with any of these guys particularly, right? I think he's going to say they all got nicks and dings, and they're all being evaluated, and they'll see how the week goes. I don't think he's going to tip his hand one way or the other on quarterback, but you could tell for the first time, I think, as a fan base, the eyeball test was there to go, oh, this is much different when Ja'Cory's in the game. Okay, now I see it again. And Taven's not perfect. Again, I think he's really got to improve situational awareness and at certain times. But our eyeball test was like, oh, that's okay. That's what it looks like. Got it. All right, so that's how we're gonna do this, right? And again, Cam Fancher, maybe he's more injured than we know. Maybe that injury is plagued him, more so than has been let on to us, and that's certainly their prerogative. You mentioned the offensive line, man. It feels so callous to do this after the week they went through, but that obviously was a tough performance by the O-line. And I think then again, to your point, I've never stood back there as a quarterback and had to, take the heat of the pressure, right? But it seemed after a point in time, Taven specifically was starting to stare at the rush, right? Yeah. His eyes were coming downfield, and he was taking a lot of check downs. And then when he wasn't taking a check down, he was throwing some really questionable 50-50 balls out there to receivers. I don't know that
balls, yeah.
I don't know. I'd be going. We went like streak fade to 5'8" Dwayne Thomas, like maybe get a bigger guy out there if we're going to run a play like that. I just think this offense, Brian, went from like, oh my goodness, look what Scott last week. My idiot self was like, professional play caller. Look what he accomplished. And now I was like, does he have a playbook in his hand? Like, what's on that piece of paper in front of him? Because it just didn't seem like the offense really was concerning. And yes, we can do the whole factor of like rough week. Frost afterwards admitted he was emotionally drained. So he talked about the team. The team knows they didn't give Kansas State their best shot. K-State did obviously come out super motivated and engaged and wanting to prove something. So maybe UCF just kind of walks into a buzzsaw situation. But you walk away from that game saying, man, like who are we offensively? Because if we're that pedestrian, that's gonna be a challenge. And if the O-line is going to continue to have their challenges up front, it's going to be even worse. But then I say this out loud, Brian, and I tell you that Miles Montgomery had 119 yards rushing. Jaden Nixon had 67 yards
a little
rushing.
bit skewed, I think.
And so it's like, what do you do with that? Like, I'm looking at it with 230 yards rushing on the ground. Like, that's a pretty good day. Like, that's not terrible. But yet again, the eye test tells you like that's not what you saw. Long runs obviously were broken by both Jaden and Miles to skew some of that. But the line, Brian, it's gonna have to figure itself out and get itself a little bit better. And again, I know it's tough. We're asking a lot of these guys. We're asking them to put behind not just like, hey, maybe my elbow hurts today, or, maybe I'm like, maybe this other guy's bigger than me. We're asking to put a lot of stuff behind to play football. But the reality is that it did not look like a P4 ready offensive line on Saturday.
Yeah, I think if you're going to put this loss on any aspect of the team, it has to be on the offensive line. And I hate to do that, to your point, as you just said, because we're coming off of, this tragedy with Sean Clark. But I think that really, if you have to point to anything, it has to be the offensive line, right? Whoever was taking those snaps, as I said earlier, they were under duress all day long. They didn't have time to throw. The running backs, other than a couple of big plays by both Miles and Jaden Nixon, 230 yards rushing, I think you just said it was. I think that's a bit skewed because each of them had, large runs at one point. So if you take away those two large runs, I think you're looking back at the running game and saying, still not quite there, which we have said for weeks past now, concerns about the running game. And does that really get put on the offensive line, or does it get put on the running backs? Probably gets put on the offensive line because you're looking at the fact that, they can't quite block for the running game. And then in this game, we saw just the quarterback just getting manhandled almost on every play. And like I said, to your point, I hate to put that on them. They've gone through so much this past week and a half, 2 weeks now. But they're going to have to get something cleaned up. And I think Scott Frost knows that. He had mentioned in his presser that K-State, and to their credit, they're coming off of a bye week. They were prepared for this game. It's very clear. But Scott Frost mentioned that the defensive line for K-State was throwing a lot of changes at the offensive line that they weren't quite picking up on or hadn't seen or prepared for. So credit to K-State. They came out with a game plan. They executed well. And we're going to have to get some things cleaned up on the offensive line. The defense, as we said, I think they played very well in this game. You had a pick on the first drive with K-State coming out. They got several 3-and-outs, got the ball back to the offense. The offense just wasn't able to produce points. And at a certain point, you have to understand that the defense is going to get tired, right? As the game goes on and they're out there more and more, you can't put that on the defense. You've got to score some points, and it just wasn't there on Saturday.
Yeah, you said it earlier. I think football's a game of momentum, right? And hey, we get the ball back. Offense, that's nothing. Hey, we get the ball back. Like as a defense, at some point, I do think some of the momentum obviously starts to go in their favor, and then becomes kind of bend don't break after a while. And they're trying to make plays where they can make plays. But I think the challenge is, you said it earlier, and I meant to hit on this after you said it. And I do think some of this is our fault. Our being fan base, I think we forgot this may be a rebuilding season. Like I think we were like, oh, we're 3-0. Like look at this. Oh, we destroyed North Carolina. Like I think there was some hope that, and again, I think we all have it. Right? We all have it as fans. We all have the hope that this is gonna be different. And I think we all had a little bit of that hope. Like maybe this is okay. Like maybe are 8 wins possible here, Brian? Maybe 9 wins, Brian. Like we all start kind of doing the math on that, and all of a sudden you realize like, oh yeah, this was what it was. I think our two biggest fears from this team specifically showed through on Saturday. One, is this a P4 ready offensive line? 2, is this a P4 ready wide receiver group? There are a couple of, like Dwayne Thomas had a ball that, Jakari threw a terrible ball. Don't get me wrong, but Dwayne Thomas probably needs to make a play on that. Right. The other interception that Taven throws is off Dwayne Thomas's helmet. Right. He can't make a play. There was a little option route Wade and Charles had, goes the wrong way. And Taven, and I think it was a 3rd down, Taven throws it in between 2 receivers. Right. Like, I think those are the 2 areas where we said, okay, can we play? Can we compete? Are we ready to compete at that level right now? And you didn't see that outside. Those are the 2 areas that are probably the ones that were the again, it's going to get skewed because DJ Black had 82 yards of a one pass play. Outside of that, Dwayne Thomas 55 yards was the most yards and receptions for the UCF wide receivers.
Yeah, the play that comes to mind for me is in the fourth quarter, UCF is driving, trying to close that deficit to your point, and a crucial fourth down, Taven throws the ball, and we've got Kylan Fox and another wide receiver that, clash in the middle of the field, and nobody catches the ball, right? So I don't know if that's a miscommunication between the wide receivers, what the play was, where the ball was going. But that is the type of stuff that, really obviously it killed the drive on that point because it gave the ball back to K-State. But, to your point, a lot of these wide receivers are still unproven. Very talented guys, don't get me wrong, but, they still have a long way to go in developing both their talent on the field and some camaraderie with the quarterback. So there's going to be these growing pains as the season continues on, but it's going to cost you in games like this against a stout defense like K-State, and you got to rely on your wide receivers to make some of these catches, whether the quarterback is having to throw the ball quicker than they would like to do or not because the offensive line can't quite stop the defense. Talented teams find a way to win through these types of adversities, and we're still, to your point, Adam, this is year zero, right? We've got to remind ourselves constantly. Perhaps this is on my plate, and this is my fault. Last week I said that
Brian Peterson's at fault.
Breaking news, Adam, here. It's my fault. I said last week I was going to change my season prediction after we beat North Carolina from 5-7 to 6-6. So very clearly, this is on me, Night Nation. I apologize.
All right.
I might need to change my season prediction back from 6-6 back to 5-7. We might have to go backwards. A lot of that's going to depend on how we play on Saturday against the Jayhawks team that lost to Cincinnati on Saturday. So they're going to come out pissed off, and we're going to wind up perhaps in a situation like we were against K-State where they need a win. So we're going to have to rely on these guys to show up on Saturday and make some big plays for us to salvage perhaps a bowl game this season.
Well, that's the other thing I think we're guilty of, Brian, and not you, me, we, although maybe us a little bit too, right? I think Night Nation is guilty of, and I think I tried to articulate this at some point on maybe I don't know what show I was on at this point, but a lot of people are doing the whole transitive property thing, like, well, Kansas State lost to Army. Army's terrible, so Kansas State is terrible. We beat them, so we're better, so we should win, right? Like, we do this thing about, like, well, they're terrible. They almost lost to North Dakota State, whatever North Dakota they almost lost to, right? And you do this thing, and you talk yourself into you just did it. I'm not blaming you, but you just said, hey, Kansas all of a sudden, now they lose to Cincinnati. Are they hungry? We play Cincinnati. Are they good? Are either one of those two teams good? No one knows anymore, right? And I think everything's a coin flip. But what we failed to think about is, yes, on paper, you might go, hey, Kansas State lost to Army and they almost lost to this team, and maybe we're better than them. You get in a home environment, you're playing a team on the road. And oh, by the way, there are factors that are outside of your control. One of which was, and I don't want to make this whole thing a conversation, but I do think you brought it up earlier, something that we all saw on social media. The officiating in this game was certainly something that seemed a little bit skewed at times, right? And whether there were holds, although there appeared to be a bunch of them were uncalled, that's the reality, though, Brian, is you're going to get a Big 12 officiating crew every single solitary game who's officiating these games, and things are going to go all kinds of different ways. And I think there's just so much nuance in every single game that I think a lot of fans are upset because they're thinking to themselves, we should have beaten this Kansas State team because of blah, 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 right? And I think when you look at it logically and you go, okay, wait a minute, like, now I see what happened. Maybe that wasn't always the case. But we're also playing the Zebras on that day, right? Yeah. Home cooking is a thing. We're still the new team in the conference. That's probably a bit of a thing. Kansas State has a reputation that they're a tough physical team. Perhaps officials will let them get away with stuff, but it certainly appeared like there were some calls that didn't go UCF's way. I think one that you and I were talking about, I think we mentioned it via chat, was the hit on Taven Jackson. I think a lot of people are wondering, what was that something that should have been flagged or for some sort of a roughing the passer? And here's the thing, I don't know, maybe. Like, it looked like he took an extra step that he didn't need to take. It looked like he drove him into the ground, which Frost referenced in his post-game press conference. So was that roughing or not? I don't know. But here's the problem. We've seen that called before in other games, right? We've seen less than that called in games. And so I think that's the thing we didn't factor in with all this stuff, is there's going to be inconsistency with a lot of different things in games. And Big 12 officiating, I think we forgot how sketchy it could be at times. And it reared its head on Saturday. Go back and watch the tape if you want to. You'll find numerous situations of angles of guys being pulled to the ground, guys being held in the jersey, and if you're not going to call, you're not going to call. That's fine, but then we need to respond and do the same thing as well. And maybe that's why we're not ready. We didn't hold as well as they held, Brian. I don't know, but I think that's an unknown factor that you have to play in there is yes, sometimes it's as simple as team A versus team B, but all these other factors get into place. And that's why I think a lot of these games are going to be coin flips because you just don't know what's going to happen. And if UCF's going to get a outside influences are going to impact the game more so than we thought they were going to.
Yeah, some of the calls, or I guess I should say no calls, were questionable on Saturday. I hate to be that guy to say, oh, this game was on the refs, it's not on the team A or B or whatever it is. But it got to the point on Saturday where I was pulling my hair out. You would see guys getting pancaked in the backfield, and there's no flags being thrown by the refs on for holding on certain plays, and to your point, Adam, whether it was, holding the jersey, you could see it from the stands. We had our good friend Dolly Drama was in the stands in Manhattan, Kansas, and he messaged us at one point and asked us, is the holding as obvious on the TV screens as it is from where we are sitting in the stands? So you have to wonder what the refs were seeing. But at the end of the day, you got to overcome that adversity, whether it's, playing the team across from you or playing the team in the stripes on the field that's officiating. You got to go out, you got to execute. And I think that Scott Frost would tell you that this team just did not execute on offense at the end of the day. You bring up a good point. That hit on Taven, I've seen several complaints on social media about calls or non-calls for other games that have taken place on Saturday. And it seemed to me that the call against Taven, or I guess I should say, again, the no call on Taven, on that play where he got injured, whether it was roughing the passer or it should have been, I think, in my opinion, but it's just questionable call. It seemed like he got the ball out, he was standing there, and then he didn't get hit and pushed to the ground. He got driven. He got body slammed to the ground, and that's what caused that injury. So you have to wonder what was going on. But again, at the end of the day, the stats don't show what the refs don't call. They just show the final score. And this is something that UCF's going to have to move on from and look ahead to Kansas and say, where can we improve and how can we go forward from here?
Well, that's something that UCF's going to have to adjust to, right? Like, this is going to be if this is the physical style of nature that's going to happen in the Big 12, then UCF's going to have to be able to in turn respond and also be as physical. It did feel like at times K-State was more physical up front, and they were getting away with stuff that we weren't doing the same, right? So are we just nice boys, Brian, and didn't want to do anything wrong, or were we just not as physical as Kansas State? Frost, after the post game, I'm curious of your thoughts on this. He didn't say it in these words, but I'm gonna paraphrase, I think, what I heard him say, which was it happens, we lost, but there's a lot we can take away from and learn from and get better from, right? Do you believe in that? I find Frost to be relatively honest in his post games. Like, I don't feel like he's coach speaking us at times. I feel like, except for he told me he had 3 quarterbacks he trusted, but whatever. I don't know that I feel like he's coach speak all the times, but do you legitimately sit there and go, okay, you know what? Yeah, tough one. We did this wrong. But like, are you encouraged that you say to yourself, hey, we can fix these things? Or are we in situations where you're like, man, like, we're gonna have to figure out how to block all year long? Like, are there things that you think happened on Saturday that are indeed quote unquote fixable to get us better against Kansas and again as the rest of the season goes on?
Yes and no, and I'll explain both of those. Yes, because I think that, well, let me start with no. At a certain point, you have to question whether or not your offensive line is good, right? And that's, to your point, that's kind of what they were discussing when Frost mentioned that, we're going to go back and we're going to look at the tape. And K-State the defensive line for K-State was throwing some stuff at us that we weren't prepared for, and they were doing some change-ups, and the offensive line did not adjust to it properly, and that's something that we can teach. At a certain point, you have to question whether or not this offensive line is just good or bad, right? And we'll see how that plays out the rest of the season. So no in that regard, but also yes in the fact that I think that, to your point, Scott Frost is very honest when he's answering these questions. It doesn't seem like it's a lot of coach speak, right? Perhaps we're biased because we're used to 4 years of the Gus bus and him coming out and saying the same thing over and over again, whether it's pregame presser or postgame presser, you didn't really glean a lot from what the coaching staff was thinking when it came to Gus. But Scott Frost does seem to have this genuine response when he's asked a question in these pressers, and you believe him, right? Maybe that's because he's on an 8-game UCF winning streak at this point that was broken on Saturday. I'm sorry, 8-year winning streak for UCF that was broken on Saturday, not 8 games. Yeah. 8 years is a long time. No, I'm kidding. But it does seem like he's being completely honest when he says that. Now, again, as I said earlier, I'm not a coach. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes when these guys are practicing. Perhaps that is something that they can adapt to as the season goes on, and this is going to be something that they're going to use as a way to learn and teach these guys as the season goes on. Frost mentioned in the post-game presser that he's like, look, I don't want to say anything because I haven't watched the tape yet. We're going to go back, we're going to watch the tape, we're going to reevaluate, and we're going to see what we can learn from this. And perhaps he legitimately believes that this is something that they can work on and get better from. And you hope so as a fan, right? You're hoping that these coaches can find a way to motivate these guys and teach them, okay, this is a learning aspect, right? We're going to learn from this game, and we're going to be stronger as the season moves forward. We'll certainly see how this offensive line and the team as a whole develops and continues to develop as the season moves forward.
Here's the other thing I was really frustrated with. And again, I realize this guy's not falling. Oh, well, maybe it is, but I don't think it's falling just yet. But this was a really good opportunity. I think where I'm, as a fan, as someone who covers the team, where I'm frustrated with is we just haven't been able to prove to the Big 12 yet that we're there. We're on their stage. We're ready, right? Like, I feel like obviously the first 2 years of Gus just have not gone well, right? We have been an afterthought in the Big 12, and this would have been such an interesting opportunity for UCF to go into Kansas State, a team that you mentioned earlier was thought to be a good surprise, a good pick on this league, and surprisingly hasn't played up to it, right? To go into Kansas State on the road to, with the adversity, to come out with a win, that would have been an opportunity for the Big 12 to kind of stand up and take, all right, well, the UCF's doing something a little bit there, right? Like, now again, I think people would have just said K-State sucks, but this was a golden opportunity for UCF to kind of get on that stage, to kind of start to begin to right the ship of the first 2 years in the Big 12 and sort of show that, hey, we belong here. We're a team, and you kind of saw the same old on Saturday, right? And I'm not comparing the Gus years to the Frost years, but the reality was the result was the same. We're in a road game, and we're not playing well, and maybe we're coming back and we just can't get the victory. And afterwards, people are like, UCF sucks. They haven't done anything in the Big 12. And the reality is, you can't combat that. Like that is an actual out. It's a hard fact truth when you look at the records, right? This was just a good opportunity for, I think, UCF to jump into that conversation and sort of say, okay, hey, we're ready to play now. We screwed up the first couple of years, but we're here, we're ready. And again, more opportunities exist, right? Like obviously Kansas is here on Saturday, right? So you can beat a Kansas team, and then you go to a Cincinnati team that just beat that Kansas team and maybe win those games, and all of a sudden, hey, okay, the UCF's doing something. But it just feels like I get frustrated that I feel like we keep having some of these missed opportunities, and we've missed 2 years of opportunities to really prove that we belong in the Big 12. And I guess that part of me was just hopeful that this could have been the opportunity for us to say, man, what a chance for us to get into a team that's reeling, that that isn't playing great, and UCF can come in there and play. And again, unfortunately, we're not ready for prime time, particularly in the first 2 quarters. And by the time I think things kind of got themselves righted, too little, too late. Now UCF's playing from behind, and I don't think that's the kind of team they want to be.
Yeah, it's really tough to be a UCF fan in the Big 12 right now. We've had a couple of years of Gus, and by all accounts, he had situations where he had a team, or at least what he projected to us, the fans, was that, hey, we've got a team that can compete, and we expect to compete for conference championships. Whether that was true or not, I don't know. But now we're coming into a situation where, Gus has exited the building, he's on to other things, and we have Scott Frost back. And this is an important aspect. I think Bailey and Christian touched on this on their post-game podcast that they put on right after the game followed up. Knight fans need to remember this offensive line is basically all new, right? They had to go in and they had to fill in a lot of spots from the transfer portal for a lot of offensive linemen. And that is extremely difficult to do. If you go look at the transfer portal, it's not like there is a ton of offensive linemen out there to choose from. So you don't expect that an offensive line that's built from the transfer portal is going to be as effective as guys that are recruited and brought in and trained and built up and built into this team the way they normally are if you're a P4 team. And perhaps that's just because we've got a new coaching staff and we are in year zero, this rebuilding type mindset. And as UCF fans, we have to remind ourselves that's where we are, right? We've got 70 players that are on this roster this year that weren't there last year. And it's just going to be a rebuilding year. Now, to your point, Adam, as a Knight fan, right, we're in year 3 of the Big 12 now, right? We're kind of getting impatient at this point where, we're used to coming into Conference USA and playing in the first ever Conference USA championship game, right? We're used to coming into the American where everybody thought Louisville was going to be the team to beat, and we go out and we get that BCS game. And, we had a pretty successful time in the American. We're stuck in a new area here for Knights fans, right? Where we're at the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, when it comes to teams in our conference. Not a lot of people are giving us a lot of credit. And to your point, we haven't proven it on the field yet, right? So it's frustrating as a UCF fan to come out and see an opportunity like this where we could have perhaps made some noise in the conference by knocking off a K-State team that was reeling. But at the same time, we've got to keep things in perspective, right? We had the loss of a coach. We're rebuilding. We're on the road. This is our first road game of the season. We didn't know how the team was going to respond to that. We get hurt. Our quarterback gets hurt in the second quarter of the game. So that throws things into flux. We've got questionable calls by the refs. I think that this was an uphill battle from the start. And we've got to remind ourselves, as Coach Heupel used to say, it's a 1-game season, right? 1-0. Let's move on to the next one. Let's gain something from this. And as we started the show out, if you ask people, would they take 3-1 coming into this week, coming into Kansas? I think most people would say 3-1 is a pretty good record. And we saw a lot of fight in this team, right? A lot of the players that came out post-game and met with the media after the game on Saturday, they all kind of had the same mindset, which was, we're going to continue to fight. We wanted to win this one. We're on to the next one, and we're ready to prove ourselves. So hopefully this is a learning, opportunity for this team, and they don't get bogged down. Now, one of the things that we're going to see from this coaching staff and these players as we move forward now is how do they adapt now that they've lost the game, right? It's easier for everybody to be rah-rah. This team is going all the way. We're behind this coaching staff, and these players are great when you're 3-0. Now that you've lost a game and kind of got punched in the face a little bit by K-State, how do you react to that? Do we crumble as we've seen with some of these teams in the last couple of years and go on a 5-game losing streak that we've done the last 2 years? Yeah, nobody wants to bring that up. But, do we use this as an opportunity for growth, or do we crumble the rest of the season? I'm really interested to see how both the defense and the offense comes out in this game against Kansas. Now that we're going to be back in the bounce house and, we lost one, how are we going to react?
Yeah, look, that's a fair point. I will say, obviously, Taven Jackson coming back in, shows his level of commitment and fight. The team, again, I think tried to hang in there and make some plays down the end. The defense, when we needed the ball back, the defense stepped up and made plays to get us the ball back. Again, offense just wasn't ready to perform at that moment in time. So I guess that's a fair point to say, like, hey, this team didn't fold. You like to see the fight, and hopefully there is something to build on from there, right? And I think that's just the PTSD element is like we haven't had that breakthrough moment yet in the Big 12. I think last year we thought it was beating TCU on the road. That turned out to really not matter in the grand scheme of things because we just sucked after that, right? So I think every opportunity you're on the stage is an opportunity to kind of take that step. And I think because Frost is back, we all feel like, okay, we're going to start making those strides now. And yes, it is year 0, right? And I think that has to be factored into. But it would have been such a really great opportunity. I feel like this was one like the Hollywood script writers could have easily been like, I got an idea for a script, everybody, right? And you ride off in the sunset with the UCF win on Saturday, right? Like, I think that would have been the way the script would have been written, and it'd been a great opportunity. Everyone says the NFL is scripted, right? Everyone write, like, why didn't we write this one out? Someone should have just wrote this one out. Early look at Kansas, Brian. Concern level so far. Obviously, we don't know about quarterback. We don't know who's playing under center, right? Offensive line, will there be changes there? Defense, will there be changes there? Kelly Lawson, not the strongest game again. He started again over Cole Kozlowski at linebacker. I thought it was interesting. Rodney Laura and Horace Lockett started up front instead of John Walker. So are there changes coming schematically elsewhere, Brian? But Kansas coming off a tough loss to Cincinnati, a team that I think a lot of other folks also wrote off, right? So early thoughts on Kansas. I know you haven't done any bit of study on them. Why should you? But early thoughts on Kansas, 7:30 at home, night game for UCF. Early thoughts on what you think can happen on Saturday.
I think I texted you earlier I'm drawing a blank. The line has come out, the point spread line has come out at -4 in Kansas's favor. So no big surprise there. I mean, UCF did not perform well on Saturday. So if you're a Vegas odds setter, you're probably looking at another Big 12 legacy team that is coming into the bounce house on Saturday that lost to a Cincinnati team. So they're going to be upset and looking for a fight on Saturday. Jalen Daniels, their quarterback for Kansas, is a real playmaker. And as we saw on Saturday, quarterbacks that can run the ball are giving our defenses headaches all day long. Avery Johnson and their backup quarterback, Barnett, was able to come in towards the end of the first quarter and make some plays using his legs. So as a Knights fan looking at how this defense is going to adapt as the season moves on, you have to wonder whether or not Jalen Daniels in this Kansas offense, is going to be able to put up some points on this defense with their quarterback being as dynamic as he is. The other side of the ball, you have to question whether or not the offensive line is going to move forward from this, and are they going to adapt? Now, one of the big criticisms of this UCF team and the team that we've had for the last couple seasons now is that we're perhaps not as beefy up front on these lines as some of these legacy Big 12 teams are. So I expect that the game is going to be won in the trenches on Saturday. So it's going to come down to how our lines adapt and play to both the offense and the defense. It's a concern that you see John Walker not playing in there. Obviously, Horace Lockett has played very well in the season so far, but you have to wonder what's going on with the defense with some of these star players getting bumped to the bench and not starting some of these games. Are there perhaps some injuries that we don't know about, lingering, nagging things that are going on there, or is it just execution at this point? So I'm really curious to see what happens. I feel a lot better now that we're going to be back in the bounce house on Saturday. I expect a crowd that's going to be pretty good for a 7:30 kick on Saturday. Hopefully it won't be as hot. But I expect that Kansas is going to come out ready for a fight.
Yeah, look, I think what's going to happen with this UCF offense, right? I think we should just stop kidding ourselves. I think UCF fast. I don't think that's making an appearance a lot in this season going. I just don't think we have the personnel to do that. If you feel better about your athletes, you feel better about your conditioning and your ability to kind of, to get people off guard, maybe you do that. It just feels like that's not the system that's going to work for UCF now. So what do we do offensively? Who's at quarterback? How do we continue to find ways to get Jaden and Miles both touches, right? I mean, I think Jaden's such a dynamic playmaker. And every time he's got the ball, he has that home run threat ability where, how do you find the way to get in the game? And then, from a receiver perspective, how do we figure that out? We should know Dylan Wade, tight end, did not play in this game. He's obviously been
big factor,
a big target for Taven Jackson, a big part of this offense so far. Kylan Fox, I think, is good as well, but I think you're taking one of your playmakers off the field and Dylan Wade. So is he back? Is he healthy? Is he ready to play when the Knights play on Saturday? I think some things to monitor, which of course we'll do for you around here at the Sons of UCF all week long, around the Kingdom Pegasus podcast. Sons of UCF Live will be on all this week. So we'll keep tabs on stuff. We'll have Trace and the intern army out at all the press availability. So keep it locked on the YouTube channel if you want the post post press conference reactions and clips and everything that comes with that as well too. So everybody though, have a fantastic week. Start of a new one for the Knights. Again, an opportunity, as Brian said, to go 1-0, and hopefully we have a chance to celebrate again after this one next week, Brian, after a big win in the bounce house. Everybody, take care of yourselves. Go Knights.
Charge on.